And we're back. So I hope you've all had pie because there was a lot of it back there and it's delicious, and we didn't have enough of it last week. So tonight we are talking about baptism, confirmation, and reception. The question is essentially framed around the way. Which one is right for me? Because the way is traditionally been our preparation for people who are contemplating baptism, reception, and confirmation. But before we dive into sort of unpacking which one might be right for you, I think it's important that we talk about what are they first. What do Episcopalians believe about baptism, confirmation, and reception? Did any of you have a chance to read the Walk in Love chapters for this week? A couple of you? All right. So recognizing that there's a few companions in the way who've read it before, and just a couple people have raised hands, but that most of you doesn't look like necessarily got around to it. I definitely commend everything I'm about to talk about is pretty much essentially available in these chapters. I'm going to try to quickly review them. And if you want to refresh yourself later, please do. The Episcopal Church, the church with a big C, has in its life things called sacraments. Sacraments are, can anybody give a definition? Keep going. Well done. Sacraments, according to the definition in the back in the Catechism of the Book of Common Prayer, are an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. That is, they are experiences, things that have stuff, that have a stuffness to them. That's the technical term. Stuffness. They are connectable with our senses. But they are not solely limited to what we can perceive with our senses. They operate not only on the level of our senses, but on the level of a spiritual reality. And so in them, we know that they function as the thing that we see and participate in. They also function on a spiritual level, connoting some sort of spiritual effect. And that spiritual effect is the grace of God, is the gift of God. The church traditionally has two core sacraments and 5 sacramental rites, at least in the Episcopal Church, 5 sacramental rites. The Roman Catholic Church just calls them all 7 sacraments. That's fine too. I'm not going to contest that. We have 2 sacraments given by Christ and 5 other sacramental rites that the church has grown to embrace over its centuries as also conveyors of grace, sacramental conveyors of grace. Tonight we're going to talk only about one of them, baptism. An easy way to dive into sacraments is to look at the Eucharist. So if it's an outward and visible sign, then the outward and visible sign of the Eucharist is you got bread, you got wine, a little bit of water. But we believe it is not only bread and water. It is bread and water, but it is now also through the prayer, the Eucharistic prayer, through the transformation of that prayer, it is now also the substance of God's own self, of Christ. And that we are taking Christ's own body and blood. Mystically. Still looks like bread and wine, but it is now also Christ. And through that, Christ feeds us graciously. So you have bread and wine, but you also have something else. Baptism, same deal. You have water and you water in words, water in particular words. Water, not just any water, water used and poured in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And traditionally also in baptism is also anointed or anointed to that. And through that water, you have the inward and spiritual grace, which is what? What is it? I don't have a chart. What is it? What is the inward and spiritual grace? What happens in baptism? Companions in the way are not invited to speak.
I can read out of the prayer book.
Well, that's good.
I'm still not invited. I'm pretty proud that I can read out of the prayer book.
Mom's
If you want a cheater, you can look in the back. I think it's like page 855, 858. That's pretty cool.
Very good.
There are 4 things that the church historically has said are happening in baptism. What are they? Name one. Cleansing of what? Like work in the garden or spirit? No. Cleansing your soul or your body to allow the Holy Spirit to.
Forgiveness of sin.
Okay. Okay. Cleansing from sin or the forgiveness of sin. We use those. Those are going to be. What are other things that we say are happening in baptism?
Are you talking about like uniting yourself with Christ? When you're being baptized, you're uniting with Christ, you're arising again.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. If we have died with Christ, then we will rise with Christ. If we have been baptized with Christ, then we will share with Christ. Paul writes a lot about this. That we somehow die in baptism and rise, which is hard to visualize in the dainty way that most Episcopalians perform baptism. I mean, we perform it very prettily. And it works, it counts, it sticks. I believe that firmly. But it is so lovely that you can lose this in a way that if you go to a baptism in, say, a river, it is easier to grasp onto this. The ancient church, we have ancient documents of the church that the custom in the ancient church was to baptize in water outdoors. And they would have most likely, if there was sufficient water, baptized with a whole body. And I mean, I love it. I wish we did. And I really love that Roman Catholic liturgical architecture in the last 50 years has reclaimed this. In many Roman Catholic buildings, you're seeing the recreation of full immersion baptismal fonts, baptistries, where you can do a baby, and so the person can hold and do the baby, but they also have the capacity to walk down into them. The next time you're in Santa Fe, if any of you go to Santa Fe, go to the Cathedral of St. Francis in Santa Fe. So you are dying and rising with Christ. You are being cleansed of your sin and forgiveness of sin. Does that mean you never have to make a confession again the rest of your life? No. This is the inauguration of that grace. This is the sort. It's not to say that a person who hasn't been baptized has no access to forgiveness. but this is a different level. This is a different type of access to the gracious forgiveness and mercy of God. Some would say this is the access to the wiping away of what is called original sin. What is original sin, Rick?
The one Adam and Eve.
Okay. What did Adam and Eve do?
They ate the apple.
They ate the apple.
They disobey. They don't listen.
All right, so around the time of Augustine in the late 3rd and 4th centuries, we start tying it back together with Adam and Eve. But the idea of original sin is that, again, it comes, I'm in no danger, don't worry, those of you who have been here long enough to have seen a curate become a Roman Catholic. I'm in no danger of becoming a Roman Catholic. But I do think some Roman Catholic theology gets a bad rap when, if you think about it, there is something important about it. Original sin, in my mind, is not about that sex is bad or that Adam and Eve's act. I mean, I don't even believe Adam, and most Roman Catholics don't believe Adam and Eve are real people. That this is a mythological story that teaches us something about human nature. So, but the idea of original sin derives from observation. When you look at the world, you see a world that is broken. You see a world in which sin corrupts everything. And you see that capacity to sin even in the youngest people. I had to have 2 beautiful daughters. And they are the most marvelous people. And I looked at them both with wonder and amazement and awe when they were born. And they are filled with goodness. Fundamentally, first and foremost, above all things, filled with goodness. And it didn't take long before they were selfish and violent and lied and were greedy and did things that humans do. And so the idea of original sin derives just from simple observation, like, where did that kid get that? I didn't teach that kid to punch and bite. It's this idea that within the human being is a capacity to sin, is an inclination to sin that we don't come by choice, that is simply within us. And original sin, whether you want to say it's passed through the sexual act, which I think is tying biology to theology in a needless way, I just think it is somehow tied up with us as creatures. And that it is true, and that somehow we need to be freed by it in the way that God intends to free us from it. Baptism is one of the ways that we are liberated from it. And then when we come in confession, either corporate in the context of a worship service, or private in the context of a private rite of reconciliation of the penitent, then we are confessing sins. But we no longer have to confess our participation in sin. And as human beings, we are participants in sin in ways that we're not even in control of, right? Like, there are things that we just are, racism is a great example. The ways that you can be consciously resistant to it when you have the ability to make decisions and choices, but somehow we're also woven into the fabric of it in our society. Another example is that I often use is when you go to Target or shop for something and you're trying to make a conscious decision to be frugal and to shop for the least expensive things because you want to stay on your budget, because you were told that staying on your budget is a good and righteous thing to do, and to not take out debt and all this sort of stuff. So you're shopping frugally and you go and buy the cheap items, and you don't necessarily notice that on the tag the item was made in, say, like Bangladesh, and it was made by some woman there who lived in subhuman standards and may have worked in a sweatshop, and that the people there were treated inhumanely. Now, you bought that garment for noble and righteous reasons, or for no reason at all other than you're trying to make a cheap decision. But you're now tied together through the fabric of sin into this web of sin. And this is, y'all ever watch The Good Place? Watch The Good Place, because The Good Place gets to this. I love The Good Place so much. The Good Place is asking this question. If the decision between going to heaven or hell is a tallying up of your points of doing good things or bad things in life, in The Good Place, no one gets out, because sin is so encapsulated everybody. Even when we're trying to make good decisions, you're still pulled down by the weight of all of these other sinful tentacles. And they played out in a humorous and wonderful and very intelligent way. Baptism is the liberation from the power of sin. I would say this is why Jesus is baptized. Jesus is the only sinless person we believe. Jesus was a human being. Jesus can't escape the web of sin, even as he was capable through his divinity to never commit a sin. Do you get that distinction? Insofar as it was up to his choice or will, he never strayed from the will of God. But insofar as he was a human being, he was a fellow participant, as are we all, in the webs of brokenness and sin that infuse the whole world. Baptism is liberation from that. Dying and rising.
Number 2 also, another way to say it would also be
Yes. Yes. And actually, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, baptism, the metaphor is not tomb, as it is in the Western Church. In Roman Catholic and Protestant churches, the metaphor of baptism is more about tomb and rebirth out of the tomb. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, it is more about womb and birth out of the womb. So the baptismal font is more like a womb, which I love. Yes?
And earlier, were you saying, like, the part of Jesus that was, like, God's Holy Son was not sinful or being sin, but the human part did? Or not
No,
quite
that would be
sure.
heresy.
Okay.
It's okay, he yelled at me a couple years
Has to be
ago.
divine.
So, no, it's a good question, and I want to try to be clear, because Jesus can't separate he doesn't like put on his God hat one day and his human hat another day. That's where they go into heresy. I'm saying that insofar as his divinity made it possible for him to always choose the good, to never, because sin by definition is to do that which separates us from God. He couldn't do that. He was incapable of doing that. So his divinity makes it possible for him to do that which none of us can, which is to never choose the wrong. And yet, by simply being human, he could not escape sin as it connects all of us together. Even when we are making conscious and willful choices of the good all the time, we are still pulled down by the tentacles of this big picture of sin. He never sinned as in little s sins, but he is human and therefore a participant in the human story. Does that make any sense?
So there wasn't, like, sin inside of him, but connecting around him.
He couldn't be less than a human being. And so through his humanity, he's connected to you and me and everybody. And in that way, though he is not sinful, he is inhabiting a world of sin and a participant in this world of sin. And therefore, in my sense, that's what makes him a savior. It's not like he was just observing it from afar. He was immersed in it. So we have two things. Number 3. Yes?
So, at the end of baptism, they say let's welcome a new expression
Yeah.
of unity, maybe,
Yeah.
with God being part of the community.
Community. Yep. Which we call the body.
Body of Christ.
You could also say initiation. We become members of the body.
person, Satan?
That's something we do within it. And all the spiritual forces of wickedness that rebel against God. I love that one. Yes. Commitment is a part of it as it's an act within it. But what is happening? What is, remember, because a sacrament is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. So these are the graces. I'm trying to get us down to the graces. Graces, cleansing of sin, dying and rising with Christ, being bound together in the church.
About allowing the Holy Spirit to enter.
Jerry is on fire. Holy Spirit, the gift of the Holy Spirit. So in baptism, we believe that we encounter the Holy Spirit in a profound and new way. Now, keep in mind that the Holy Spirit can do whatever she wants. As we learned from that story from Numbers, where Eldad and Medad and Crawdad and Doodad were somewhere else. And the Spirit showed up regardless. And yet, in baptism, one of the graces is that the Holy Spirit comes to dwell with us and in us and through us in a new way. This is what we believe is happening in baptism. When that baby is being held, or when as an adult you are there and your head is leaning over and we're pouring water on it. If you've been baptized, this is what happened to you, whether you were aware of it or not. And that's why we call it and that's why we baptize babies. I love believers' baptism. I think it's fantastic. We have a man in the back who was baptized just a couple years ago. Participating in Al's baptism was a profoundly special moment in my life, as it has been to baptize adults several times. People who have come to the faith or been able to proclaim their faith as adults is powerful. But ultimately, what is happening is not their own power, but it is the power of God. And that's why we baptize babies, because we say that power of God, that grace, can happen in a little baby. It's not about baby. It's not God.
Question.
Please.
This is a stupid question, but grace is used in so many different ways and in so many different contexts. I can't get a grip on what it means.
Yeah. Good question. All right, next question. Grace, in this sense, is about free gift. That it is unearned, undeserved. And so these are things that God gives us, not that we earn them, but that they are given. You'll hear it in lots of other contexts too, but fundamentally the idea of grace is derived from that. Things God gives that we didn't earn or deserve. We didn't do it. And so, in baptism, like, I may pour the water, but God is doing the work. And actually, this is important to note. Baptism is a sacrament that you don't need a priest for. You don't know you don't actually have to have a priest there? I've told this story before.
We know that.
Yeah, so baptism is a sacrament performed by any baptized Christian on any person who desires to be baptized. So if you find yourself in a situation of dire need, of urgent need, if a baptized Christian is able to baptize you, God is there. Now, it necessitates a couple of things: water and the words, I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. You can't make up your own formula. Jesus gave us a formula, so we use it. But that counts. I've told this story many times, but I love to tell it. I did my field ed in seminary in a church in Virginia, And one of the men on my committee who was working with me and a friend to me while I was there, I was like an intern. He, a couple years prior, had not been baptized. His daughter was 3, and she was going to get baptized, but he decided he wasn't ready to be baptized yet. And so the 3-year-old daughter, very smart, very precocious, goes to all the class. Goes to class, like a class or two with the rector, and has some conversations and learns things. She's so smart, Rebecca. And she gets baptized, and she knows what she's doing. And Brent has not chosen to be baptized. A couple months later, he's a month or two later, he's bathing Rebecca, and they're playing in the bathtub, and she says, "Daddy, let's play baptism." And she says, "Daddy, lean your head over the bathtub." And he leans his head over the bathtub because he's playing along, and she takes, a big old cup of water and pours it over the head, just like had been done to her. "I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." And it's all so cute and sweet. And a couple months later, he's now ready to be baptized, and he goes in to tell the rector, actually his wife is, they're standing there together, and okay, I'm ready to be baptized. And Susie, the wife, says, "But I've got a great story about what Rebecca did last month." And the rector's like, "Well, I think he's been baptized." He was. So that next Sunday, they didn't pour water over his head. He was anointed. He participated fully in the rite, the renunciation of evil, the turning, the whole baptismal covenant, but there was no water poured over his head. His daughter had baptized him in the bathtub. Cool. Any baptized Christian can make any new baptized Christian. All right. This is what we believe, friends, about baptism. Yes, Rick.
It's probably an old wives' tale, but my mom says if you're not baptized and you die, you go to limbo.
Yeah.
What do we really believe?
So not even the Catholic Church really talks about limbo anymore. They've kind of walked that back. I wouldn't say that it's not doctrine anymore, but they just are really uncomfortable talking about it. I think the church is wrestling. I think the Roman Catholic Church is wrestling with that. The Episcopal Church doesn't believe anything about that. Baptism is those things, but in the life of a child, and we who want to say that the mercy of God is boundless, is not bound up in whether we have participated in the rite or not. Certainly true in the life of a child. So there is no place where some people go, children, to be held, because they're not accountable because they haven't been baptized. The Episcopal Church would say God can figure all that out. Yes.
What you just described, what you just explained, that applies to the Episcopal Church. Is that correct?
I'd say most Protestant churches would say something similar. Although those who really want to double down on baptism, believers baptism, adult baptism, would probably say, no, you got to get baptized. Except for children, and they would say, until you are mature enough to make a profession of faith, then you're not accountable for it. Okay, so what is confirmation? In the early church, the only one who did baptisms, unless it was an emergency, was the bishop. So in the early church, bishops did all baptisms. The church was much smaller then. And bishops did baptisms because it was one of the things they did as a symbol of their authority, of passing on the faith, and of interacting with every Christian. In not too long, though, there were too many Christians or too many wannabe Christians and too few bishops. As the church grew, and just imagine that Roman Empire, as the church spread, bishops couldn't keep up, And so presbyters, priests, became able to baptize. But the church wanted to hold on to the symbol of unity. This idea that bishops who trace themselves back all the way to the apostles are touching and laying hands on everybody. So, stand up and come up here and stand up here. I'm going to stop talking at you. And you got to form a line, Congo line style, and turn and face the person, and put your hands on the back. And you're going to we're not going to cha-cha-cha, but we'll just put a nice line. Estella will be on one end and we're going to come this way and wrap around that way. So, yeah, you can just stop and you can just come in and take your places in line. Yeah, that's okay, yeah. So, and then, Jerry, you're good right there. And then come in here. All right. But I'm going to come over here with Robert. All right. So the idea of confirmation is that, I'm just going to make Carol the Apostle Peter.
Again?
I'm the one who never stops talking.
Indeed, yes, exactly. She is really actually nothing like Peter. She is so thoughtful in her words. The idea of confirmation is that this is a way that we physically, sacramentally, in that sense, but physically, trace ourselves all the way back to the apostles. To Peter and his brethren. That through having the hands of a bishop on you, who was ordained and confirmed and ordained by a bishop, who was ordained and confirmed by a bishop. Laying on of hands and praying over and attesting to the faith and confirming the faith, generation after generation after generation, all the way back through time. All the way back to the time of the apostles. Confirmation, through the unity offered to us in bishops, connects us to Christ. That is why we do this. Confirmation is 100% optional. The Episcopal Church does not require it from membership. Membership in the church, we just talked about this, happens at
Baptism.
When do you become a member in the Episcopal Church? When you're baptized. I want you to hold on to that. Baptism is when you become a member in the Episcopal Church. So when you come to us from another church, if you transfer from the Roman Catholic Church, or you transfer from the Methodist Church, or you transfer from Disciples of Christ, if you're baptized, you come here and you say, I would like to be a member, I'm going to say, okay, tell us when and where you were baptized. That's it. We don't rebaptize people, and we don't require a whole bunch of stuff to be a member. I'm going to invite you to come to the way. That's probably why some of you are here. So that you can learn and go deeper in your faith. But to be a member, all you have to do is be baptized. To be confirmed is to take this step, is to choose to want to participate in this, and to stand in the midst of the congregation and to say before that bishop and a whole community of fellow believers, I believe this stuff that maybe you were a baby when you were baptized. I believe this, and this is the way I want to make my life. I am orienting my life about this, and a bishop confirms it. That's what happens. A bishop confirms your faith. So, last year, Wayne Oxborough was baptized in the presence of a bishop, so he got a twofer. He didn't have to come back because he was baptized in the presence of a bishop, so he was confirmed at the same time. He made his profession of faith in baptism in the presence of a bishop, so it was a twofer. For most of us, we don't get that luxury. This is what we're doing in confirmation. And we believe that some churches have this, what's called apostolic succession. Roman Catholics, Lutherans among them. And that those churches who come to us, if you've been confirmed in another tradition, then your confirmation is valid and legit, and you can tell us simply the dates of that. But lots of other traditions don't have confirmation. This is actually one of the sort of stumbling blocks of our cross-dialogue, ecumenical dialogue with the Methodist Church. Because Methodists see bishops a little bit differently than we do. We're probably going to overcome it and come to a full dialogue, a full communion with the Methodist Church, but this will be an issue for us. Because the Methodist Church has not focused so much on this as we have historically. But ultimately, this is why we invite people to be confirmed, is to participate in this. To be received is to have done both of those other things, baptism and confirmation, and now to come to the Episcopal Church and want to stand in the presence of a bishop and say, no, I want to be an Episcopalian. I want to be a member of this communion. And the bishop says, I welcome you into this fellowship. But there's nothing sacramental happening. There is just a public declaration. Yeah. And public declarations mean something. Promises mean things, but it is not sacramental. All right, questions? Doesn't matter. You can sit back down.
Oh, thanks.
I wonder if any of you have been wrestling with whether to be baptized, confirmed, or received. And you might have a question about that, or Angela, you might have another question entirely. Reaffirmed.
Received, were confirmed, and were baptized.
So you can also reaffirm. To reaffirm is to say, I made a public affirmation, a confirmation. Maybe I was 13, or maybe it was so long ago, and I have like this whole life in between then and now. And what I really need to do for myself is to stand back up in the presence of a congregation of God and of a bishop and make that affirmation again. And so that's where we reaffirm your baptismal promises. You would have already been confirmed, but you reaffirmed it. Yeah.
So, when you decided to become an Episcopal,
Yes.
you already explained it, in the sacraments, baptism, confirmation is accepted, but it has to be done, the affirmation, I think you call it, by the bishop.
Reception.
Oh.
Yep. Reception into the Episcopal Church is something you can do to make public that you have become an Episcopalian. It's not necessary, but it is something people choose to do so that they can boldly and publicly declare this in the presence of the bishop.
So the bishop comes exclusively for women, or do we have to go somewhere?
No, it would happen here.
Oh, okay.
Bishop Smith is coming here in early April or May. I'm foggy on the details. April or May, I'm soggy on the details. And when Bishop Smith comes, it would happen then. Yeah.
So, going back to reaffirm. So
Yeah.
we were received 3 years ago by the Bishop of Arizona.
Yeah.
So we would be reaffirming.
You would be reaffirming, because
The reception.
you've been baptized,
Confirmed.
confirmed, and received, and you would be reaffirming your baptismal promises.
Vestry members, they must be confirmed?
That is the only difference. To run for vestry, you have to be a confirmed member. Correct. To be a member, baptism. To be an elected leader, confirmation. Yep. To be a voting member of the church, just baptism. I was confused in the last couple of years until I found out that we were turning people away from voting because they hadn't been confirmed. I'm like, we can't do that. We're not allowed to do that. The Episcopal Church does not believe that. So
Voter suppression.
that is a demonstration of being a member in good, what is called in good faith. Yeah.
Where do I learn about all the hierarchy of this church?
That's next week. The hierarchy of the church polity will be discussed next week.
So I plan to be baptized
Mhm.
and go through everything again.
Yeah.
But when does that take place?
Yeah.
I've been looking at the calendar, different things, trying to figure out, looking at our schedule here.
We're talking about baptism?
Yeah.
So for adults, traditionally here, it has always happened at the Easter Vigil.
Okay.
So this year, that's April 9th, I think. And that's the Saturday night on the eve of Easter Day. And by ancient tradition, so when I talked earlier about how people were baptized in outdoors in water where hopefully they could really get down into it, the tradition is that those people were adults. So by ancient custom, that always happened in the pre-dawn, usually right before sunrise of Easter Day. So the most ancient traditions we have is that adults would be baptized in what's called the Easter Vigil, just like what we do here. And that's when Mr. Zeke was baptized a couple of years ago. So it is not only the time we baptize adults. We baptized Wayne. Bishop Wayne baptized Little Wayne. And he's not little. Big word. Big word. On a totally different occasion, because Wayne he desired that. But by tradition, that's the most appropriate occasion. And we have a whole season during Lent is when we do some special things with what are called, the adult catechumens. And we do some special things in our worship services to honor people who are about to be baptized. So it was really great at the Great Vigil. The confirmations, receptions, and reaffirmations will happen when Bishop Smith comes, whenever it is, in late April or early May.
A couple of weeks.
I'm aware of the time. Any last questions? Please, Peter.
At the end of the baptism, you put the little stall on,
Yes.
make them ministers in Christ's church.
Yes.
So we're ministers, that really got me.
No, we're not just ministers. We are members of the royal priesthood
Yes.
of all believers. That's a language that comes from the book of Hebrews. And I have never been in a church that gave people stoles before. Gave babies, stoles. And I love it. So as a symbol of the royal priesthood conferred on them in baptism, we give them a little stole, like a little priest stole. Now, as I say that, we're looking for a new person to make those stoles. Whitney Holly, who's been making them for the last several years, is moving, and the person before her moved, and they're moving to Denver. Yeah, at the end of the month. Yeah, he took her job. Yeah. So the Hollies are moving. Y'all don't. Some bunch of y'all don't even know who they are, but they're really, really special people to us. And Whitney has been the one who needle pointed the little stoles. They are very special, and so we're looking for a new needle pointer. I'm looking at you, Jennerson. You got a needlepoint artist in you. All right, it's 9 o'clock. I'm very thankful for you. We covered a lot today. Hopefully there's some stuff for you to take home and chew on a little bit more. It is Advent. Please carve time out to slow down every day. If you don't do it, it's going to get sucked up. All that time, it'll get sucked up. Carve it out. Read a devotion. Just be quiet. Renew your commitment to prayer. Find an Advent discipline that reminds you that we're in a season of preparation and reflection before we jump into the heightened joy. And that's not to say don't be joyful. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying, in Lent, there isn't a wider world screaming at us, Easter! But right now, the world just wants to hyper do Christmas, and we just need a little extra time to get ourselves spiritually ready. So it takes a little extra effort.
Amen.
Somebody,
Yes?
somebody gave me this suggestion to read Luke
Hmm,
every day.
I like that.
For 24 days.
I think it's a great idea. Vicki would say yes. All right, unless there's anything else, I'll stick around for a few minutes if you have questions. Go in peace to love. Huh?
Compliment?
Oh, you're kidding me.
We'll do
Okay,
compliment.
let's do compliment.